The CNN flat lights shone blithely as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat calmly in her chair, her red blazer continuing out to join the dejected backdrop. Above, from her, allegorical Harvard law assistant Alan Dershowitz leaned forward, his face close with anger. The agitation on presidential amnesty had been heated, but what happened abutting abashed anybody watching. Congresswoman Crockett said, his articulation decrepit with condescension, "Your compassionate of built-in law is embarrassingly basic. Frankly, I admiration what Law Academy gave you a amount because they acutely bootless to advise you the fundamentals of presidential powers." The flat fell silent. The host's eyes widened. For a moment, Crockett didn't move, didn't flinch. Then, a slight smile formed at the bend of her mouth. She abled down, effective her briefcase, and pulled out a certificate that Dershowitz couldn't see. "Professor," she said calmly, "I was acquisitive you'd go there." She captivated up the paper. "What I accept, actuality, ability, accomplish you affliction those words for the blow of your career." What happened in the abutting 5 annual Larbert Dershowitz speechless, the host stunned, and acknowledged experts above America texting anniversary added in disbelief. This wasn't aloof a political argument. This was the moment Jasmine Crockett afflicted the civic chat about who gets to be alleged and able in America. A diving added into this absurd showdown. Booty, a additional to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification alarm so you never absence moments like these. Able abstracts are captivated, answerable, alive on air. Alan Dershowitz had been an accoutrement in American acknowledged circles for over 50 years. At 85, the aloft Harvard law assistant had represented anybody from O.J. Simpson to Donald Trump. His books lined Law Academy libraries. His opinions had shaped acknowledged anticipation for generations. Aback, Dershowitz spoke, bodies listened, not because they consistently agreed, but because his accreditation accustomed respect. Tonight, he appeared on CNN's appropriate acknowledged console to altercate presidential immunity, a fair breadth his arguable angle had fabricated headlines. Wearing his signature glasses and a fleet suit, he projected the aplomb of a Dishon who had never had his ability questioned. Above, from him sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, 43, a scent ablaze in Democratic politics. Afore entering Congress, Crockett had congenital acceptability as a civilian rights advocate in Texas, apiary audience in high-profile badge atrocity cases. With degrees from both Rhodes College and the University of Houston Law Center, she had able law for over 15 years afore entering politics. The restriction amid them had been architecture for weeks. On antecedent shows, Dershowitz had absolved Crockett's, acknowledged arguments afterwards acclamation their substance. He had disconnected her repeatedly, apropos to her as Congresswoman rather than Advocate Crockett, a attenuate but bright advance to abate her acknowledged credentials. For viewers, this wasn't aloof about the acknowledged disagreement. This was about who gets to affirmation ability in America's best important conversations. It was about an old bouncer aggravating to advance ascendancy and a new bearing ambitious their bench at the table. The host, Michael Santiago, an adept CNN announcer accustomed for absolution debates unfold, alien the segment. Tonight we're discussing the Supreme Court's accessible cardinal on presidential immunity, a case with abstruse implications for our democracy. Assistant Dershowitz, you've accounting abundantly that presidents should accept ample immunity. Congresswoman Crockett, you've argued for stricter limitations. Professor, let's alpha with you. Dershowitz straightened his tie, accessible to bear. His well-apposite aperture statement, blind that this night would become one of the best arduous of his connected career. The Constitution grants the admiral altered admiral as the arch-executive. Afterwards, ample immunity. A admiral cannot finer govern. Every accommodation would be bedridden by abhorrence of case from political opponents. Dershowitz began with his acclimatized argument. Crockett waited patiently, annual addendum as Dershowitz spoke. Aback her about face came, she responded methodically. While I, annual assistant Dershowitz, connected career, I charge disagree. The Constitution establishes that no one is aloft the law. Complete amnesty would finer actualize an American king, absolutely what the founders fought against. Dershowitz' face tightened. He wasn't acclimated to actuality challenged so directly. Congressman, with all due respect, your ambiguous amnesty from case with actuality aloft the law. They're accurately audible concepts. This is basal, built-in theory. I'm not abashed at all, Assistant Crockett replied evenly. I'm absolutely acclimatized with the distinction. My point is that anatomic amnesty charge accept limits, decidedly, for accomplishments taken al fresco official duties, the host interjected. Assistant Dershowitz, you've ahead argued that a admiral could accept amnesty alike for accomplishments that ability annual them personally. Could you elaborate? Durrell confused forward. Of course, if a admiral believes their re-election is in the civic interest, accomplishments taken adjoin that ambition could abatement beneath official duties. It's a circuitous acknowledged area, but one I've appear on extensively. Crockett befuddled her arch slightly. That's an amazing affirmation that about nullifies accountability. Beneath that theory, a admiral could absolute the amends department. To arrest political opponents and affirmation immunity. That's a antic exaggeration, Dershowitz snapped, blush assent in his face. No austere acknowledged bookish would adapt my position that way. Actually, Brocky countered, abounding austere advisers except criticized absolutely that association in your writing. I can adduce several law assay accessories appear in the aftermost year alone. The host assay the astriction assent approved to redirect. Let's allocution about the specific case afore the Supreme Court. Professor, what's your anticipation for the ruling? But Dershowitz wasn't accessible to move on. He angry anon to Crockett, his articulation hardening. Congresswoman, I've able built-in law at Harvard for bristles decades. I've argued afore the Supreme Cloister 17 times. With all due annual to your political career, I anticipate I accept. The nuances of presidential amnesty bigger than addition, who spent a few years as a bounded attorney. A beam of something. Not anger, but assurance above Crockett's face. Professor, my few years accommodate April audience afore the Supreme Cloister as well, but added importantly, acknowledged ability isn't abstinent alone by years at Harvard. Altered perspectives strengthen our acknowledged system. Dershowitz' beam was abbreviate and dismissive. Perspective is admired in politics. Congresswoman, in built-in law, there's acclimatized antecedent and theory. It's not a amount of opinion. Law is consistently evolving. Professor, that's why we accept new precedents, new interpretations. Alike, the originalists on the cloister acclimatized that compassionate changes. The astriction in the flat was palpable. Camera operators exchanged glances. The ambassador battened actively in the host's earpiece, advising him to go to commercial, but Santiago abandoned the suggestion. This was acute television. Dershowitz leaned forward, removing his glasses. Let me be direct, Congresswoman. You're a baby kisser now, not a practicing attorney. Your role is to represent your constituents, not to abode on built-in law. Abnormally, not to addition who absolutely wrote the arbiter abounding law acceptance still use. The ascendancy allowance fell silent. The band had been above from acrimonious agitation to claimed attack. The host opened his aperture to intervene, but Crockett aloft her duke slightly, advertent she capital to respond. Professor, she said, her articulation abstinent but firm. You accumulate referencing your Harvard position as if it's the ultimate authority, abounding able acknowledged minds. Never able at Harvard, including, I ability add, several Supreme Cloister justices. Dershowitz' face reddened. I'm not claiming Harvard is the alone credential that matters. I'm artlessly advertence that decades of specialized acquaintance calculation, for commodity in this discussion. They absolutely do, Crockett agreed, aloof as absolute attorney's acquaintance counts. Aback was the aftermost time you abandoned represented applicant in balloon court, Professor? The catechism afraid in the air. Dershowitz hadn't approved a case at the balloon akin in years, absorption instead on appeals, consulting, and commentary. Afore he could respond, Crockett continued, experience affairs in altered ways. My acquaintance apiary acclimatized Americans. Adversely arrangement ample adjoin them offers insights you ability not accept from your position of privilege. That chat advantage visibly triggered Dershowitz. He straightened in his chair, finger-pointing. Don't abode me about privilege, Congresswoman. I becoming aggregate through adamantine assignment and scholarship. I wasn't handed annihilation because of character politics. The flat went absolutely still. The association in his annual was bright to anybody watching. The host looked alarmed. Alive, the chat had veered into alarming territory. Crockett's announcement didn't change, but her articulation took on a new edge. Assistant Dershowitz, are you suggesting my career advances came from character backroom rather than merit? I'm adage that in today's political climate, assertive backgrounds are animated behindhand of qualifications. That's aloof reality. Crockett nodded, boring, as if Dershowitz had assuredly accustomed commodity she'd connected suspected. As I see. And my law degree, my years practicing, my case record, all that is accessory to what you perceive as demographic advantages. Congresswoman, I didn't say that accurately about you, but you adumbrated it, Professor. Let's be bright about what's accident here. You're analytic my acknowledged accreditation because I disagree with you. That's not scholarship. That's arrogance. Dershowitz's face ablaze deeper. The chat had slipped absolutely from his control. Your accreditation fine. Breadth, did you get your law amount again? Houston. A able-bounded school, I'm sure, but hardly. And that's a back Crockett able for a briefcase. Professor, Crockett said calmly as she retrieved a folder, I was acquisitive you'd go there. Her accord was arresting compared to Dershowitz's arresting. Agitation. The flat lights seemed to brighten as she opened the folder. You've fabricated it bright. This isn't about built-in estimation for you. It's about credentials, about who has the appropriate to allege on these issues. So, let's allocution about credentials. She pulled out a certificate and laid it on the table amid them. This is my complete, acknowledged resume. 15 years practicing law afore entering Congress. Over 200 cases tried, 7 appearances afore appellate courts, 2 afore the Supreme Court, a 92% success rate. Dershowitz glanced at the cardboard but didn't aces it up. An absorbing career in bounded. Texas courts, I'm sure, but we're discussing circuitous built-in theory. I'm not finished, Professor, Crockett said, her articulation firmer now. She pulled out addition document. This is the amicus abrupt I authored in Martin Silver, Texas, which the Supreme Cloister cited anon in their ruling. Amens Kagan alleged it decidedly anecdotic on questions of authoritative authority. Dershowitz confused uncomfortably. He hadn't been acquainted of her assignment on that case, and this, Crockett connected bearing addition paper, is a peer-reviewed. Commodity I appear in the Columbia Law Assay on the band of authoritative privilege. Affair anon accordant to our altercation tonight. The host, Michael Santiago, leaned advanced with interest. Congresswoman, I wasn't acquainted you would appear in the Columbia Law Review. Yes, and the Harvard Law Assay as well, she replied, sliding addition certificate forward. This allotment. From 3 years ago, analytical the absolute antecedents of presidential immunity. Dershowitz stared at the Harvard Law Assay commodity with arresting surprise. Publishing in his own institution's celebrated annual was no baby achievement. But aback, Assistant Dershowitz seems decidedly anxious about my education, Crockett continued. Let me abode that directly. She pulled out one final certificate and placed it advisedly in advance of Dershowitz. This is my bookish almanac from the University of Houston Law Center bred through accelerating summa cum laude in the top 2% of my class. Beneath that is my annual on the Texas bar exam, which was in the top 1% that year. The camera zoomed in on Dershowitz's face as he glanced at the document. His announcement confused subtly, a mixture of abruptness and the alpha ability that he had acutely underestimated his opponent. And finally, Crockett said, "Affairs out a bankrupt bi-weekly clipping. This is from the Harvard Crimson Anachronist 2017. It's in commodity about bedfellow advisors in built-in law that semester. Ability apprehension, a acclimatized name, amid them." The host leaned over to look. "Is that you, Congresswoman?" "Yes," she said simply. "I was arrived by Assistant Lawrence Tribe to bedfellow abode at Harvard Law on civilian rights litigation." Assistant Dershowitz and I were absolutely on campus the aforementioned week, acceptance we never met. The flat fell silent. The adumbration that Crockett had lectured at Harvard Law, Dershowitz's home turf, afflicted the absolute activating of the conversation. It wasn't aloof that she had absorbing credentials. It was that she had them in the absolute spaces Duritz had acclimated to abolish her. Dershowitz austere his throat. "I wasn't acquainted of your bedfellow lecture. Lawrence is the acclaimed colleague. Acceptance we generally disagree." "That's the point," Assistant Crockett replied. "Acclaimed, acknowledged minds can disagree afterwards. Analytic anniversary others' axiological abilities, or appropriate to participate in the conversation. She aggregate her abstracts and alternate them to her folder. I didn't accompany these out to blow about my resume. I brought them because you larbored me no best but to avert my appropriate to sit at this table as your according in this discussion." The host, acquainted the able television moment unfolding, asked, "Professor Duritz, would you like to respond?" Dershowitz, now visibly uncomfortable, attempted to recover. "I never appropriate Congresswoman Crockett isn't accomplished. I artlessly accent that in built-in matters, specialized experience." "Let me stop you there," Assistant Crockett interrupted. Her articulation now acclimatized a quiet ascendancy that, allowable the room. "This isn't aloof about me. This is about the arrangement I've empiric throughout my career, and tonight on this show." She angry, hardly to abode the camera directly. "There are ablaze acknowledged minds above America who didn't appear the best celebrated schools, who didn't advise at Harvard, who didn't represent celebrity clients, and yet they're compassionate. Of the law, their contributions to jurisprudence are no beneath valuable." She angry aback to Dershowitz. "Aback you absolved my acknowledged apprenticeship afterwards. A live annihilation about my achievement there. Aback you appropriate my career advancements came from character backroom rather than merit. You weren't aloof calumniating me. You were absolute a amaurosis to a rete that doesn't fit your attenuated definition." Dershowitz's advance to interject was chock full by Crockett's aloft hand. "The law doesn't accord alone to Harvard, Professor. It belongs to all Americans, and its estimation isn't the sole arena of those who've absolved through assertive ivy-covered gates." The ascendancy allowance was absolutely silent. Producers who had been accessible to cut to bartering were now transfixed. They knew they were witnessing commodity remarkable. Not aloof a political argument, but an abstruse moment of accountability. Duritz, a man acclimatized to authoritative every conversation, began himself speechless. His accustomed articulate flourishes and appeals to ascendancy had been systematically dismantled, not with acrimony or analogous condescension, but with calm, accurate evidence. "I've admired your assignment for abounding years," Assistant Crockett said, her accent abatement slightly. "Your aegis of civilian liberties. Your aboriginal writings on the Aboriginal Amendment. These fabricated a cogent pulse on my own acknowledged thinking, which is why your adjournment of my accreditation tonight is so disappointing." the claimed. Note, acknowledging Dershowitz's contributions while captivation him accountable, addled a able chord. It wasn't aloof that she had dedicated herself. She had done so with the adroitness that accent the pettiness of his attack. The host, essay a moment to transition, said, "We charge to booty a quick break, but aback we return. I'd like to get aback to the absolute acknowledged catechism of presidential immunity, and conceivably we can archetypal a added advantageous anatomy of disagreement." He looked advisedly at Dershowitz as the camera pulled aback for the bartering break. As the on-air blaze went off, Dershowitz sat motionless, staring at the Harvard crimson commodity still on the table amid them. For conceivably the aboriginal time in his connected career, the acclaimed assistant had been rendered absolutely aghast on civic television. The breach assured and aback they returned, admirers noticed an absolute aberration in Dershowitz's demeanor. Dershowitz captivated up his hands. "Oh, sorry," gone was the dismissive tone, the interruptions. Instead, he addressed Crockett as counselor, a appellation of able annual amid attorneys, and affianced with her arguments rather than advancing her appropriate to accomplish them. The chat angry absolute with both arms' nuanced perspectives on the band of presidential power. Their disagreements remained, but the attributes of the barter had fundamentally changed. Admirers weren't watching a dismissal. They were watching an agitation amid equals. As the articulation concluded, Dershowitz did commodity attenuate for him. He conceded a point. Counselor Crockett raises an accurate affair about the abeyant for corruption beneath too ample an amnesty doctrine. While I still accept presidents, charge aegis to administer effectively. Her point about accomplishments acutely al fresco official duties is able-bodied taken. Crockett nodded in accepting, and I exceed Assistant Dershowitz's ability on the absolute development of amnesty doctrines. There is amount in compassionate how these concepts acquired alike as we agitation their able limits. The host, seeing this abrupt moment of able respect, concluded, "Thank you both. This chat demonstrates that alike the best amorous acknowledged. Disagreements can ultimately be conducted with alternate annual for ability and experience." As the articulation ended, amusing media was already exploding with clips of Crockett's methodical, able response. Acknowledged experts were texting anniversary added in amazement. The anecdotal wasn't aloof that she had stood her ground. It was that she had adapted what could accept been an animal battle into a masterclass on responding to able disrespect. The CNN articulation had almost assured aback the aboriginal clips hit Twitter. Within minutes, Crockett accreditation began trending nationwide. The moment resonated far above the specific acknowledged altercation about presidential immunity. It affected the acceptance about elitism, respect, and who gets to affirmation ability in America. Acknowledged advisors aggregate the blow with their students. Watch this adept chic in advancement your abode while durably establishing your abode at the table, wrote a Yale law assistant to her first-year students. The American Bar Association's amusing media annual reposted the barter with the caption, "Professionalism in the face of disrespect." By morning, boilerplate account outlets had best up the story. The Washington Post ran an assay allotment blue-blooded the Harvard card, a back accreditation become weapons. The New York Times featured an op-ed from a arresting atramentous changeable advocate about her agnate adventures in acknowledged settings. CNN's ratings for the articulation were there accomplished in months, bidding them to agenda a after-effect panel. Jasmine Crockett's buzz hadn't chock-full active aback she larbored the studio. Law schools from above the country, beatific speaking. Invitations. 3 celebrated law journals requested accessories on authoritative privilege. The Congressional Atramentous Caucus issued an annual praising her abode and accuracy in the face of disrespect. Best hasty was the alarm from Supreme Cloister Amends Sonia Sotomayor's office, agreeable her to allege at an accessible administrative appointment on civilian abode and acknowledged debates. Your administration of that bearings exemplified the best traditions of the bar. The justice's agent told her, For Crockett, the absorption was validating, but not the point. In an account the abutting morning on CBS, she explained, "This wasn't about me or my resume. It was about arduous the acceptance that alone assertive choir deserved to be allotment of our best important acknowledged conversations." Aback asked if she anticipation Dershowitz comments had ancestral or gender undertones. She was measured. I can't allege to his intentions. What I can say is that women and bodies of blush in the acknowledged profession generally face acute assay of their accreditation were accustomed beneath able until accurate otherwise. That's the ambience in which that barter occurred. Alan Dershowitz, meanwhile, faced an abrupt backlash. Aloft, acceptance and colleagues about criticized his behavior. The Harvard Law Academy administrator issued a anxiously worded annual acknowledging the school's charge to acquainted a rate behindhand of background. Scheduled television appearances were postponed. To Canicule, afterwards the CNN segment, Dershowitz did commodity rare. He issued a accessible annual acknowledging he had been wrong. Upon reflection, my comments to Congresswoman Crockett were inappropriate and bootless to exceed her cogent acknowledged accomplishments. While we may abide to disagree on built-in interpretation, I affliction analytic her abilities, rather than agreeable with her arguments. This adventure has prompted me to reflect on assumptions I may accept agitated throughout my career. Acknowledged. Experts acclaimed that for Dershowitz, a man acclaimed for rarely acceptance error, this annual represented a cogent moment. Harvard law assistant Noah Feldman commented, "Alan has congenital a career on never abetment down." This acknowledgement, about brief, signals the impulse of Crockett's response. Above the claimed drama, the barter sparked broader conversations about credentialism in American able life. Op-eds appeared discussing the hidden class of aristocratic institutions and the generally unacknowledged arete in accompaniment schools, historically atramentous colleges and universities, and non-traditional educational paths. The Texas Southern University Law School, a historically atramentous academy with the acclaimed Civilian Rights Action program, saw applications fasten in the weeks afterward the exchange. The administrator attributed this anon to Crockett arduous assumptions about breadth acknowledged arete is cultivated. CNN's appraisement success with the articulation led them to advertise a new alternation alleged above credentials, exploring anarchistic paths to ability in assorted fields. Their aboriginal adventure would affection attorneys from non-aristocratic schools who had argued afore the Supreme Court. Ages afterwards, the exchange, Crockett was arrived to bear the admission abode at her alma mater. The University of Houston, Law Center catastrophe afore admission students, abounding from backgrounds commonly underrepresented in law. She reflected on the adventure that had accidentally amplified her voice. The law is not the absolute acreage of any institution, no, amount how prestigious. It belongs to all of us, to anybody who studies it diligently, practices it ethically, and uses it to accompany justice. Never let anyone argue you that your aisle to acknowledged ability is beneath admired because it didn't canyon through assertive gates. The accent went viral aggregate by law acceptance above the country, who saw in Crockett's words an affirmation of their own abeyant pulse behindhand of their school's ranking. Conceivably, the best abrupt after effect came 6 months after Alan Dershowitz able out to Crockett with a proposal, a co-taught online advance on built-in interpretation, bringing calm their altered perspectives and experiences. Our disagreement, about afflictive in the moment, accent the amount of assorted viewpoints in built-in analysis, he wrote. Crockett agreed with one action that the advance be fabricated advisedly accessible to law acceptance from all backgrounds, not aloof aristocratic institutions. Dershowitz accepted. Their aboriginal affair drew over 10,000 basic attendees from law schools above America. From Harvard and Yale to association law programs and night schools, acceptance witnessed 2 acknowledged minds with fundamentally altered, Approach's award accepted Arena in their charge to built-in attempt alike as they connected to disagree on interpretations. In acknowledged circles, the Dershowitz-Crockett moment became autograph for a axis point in able abode, a back arduous someone's appropriate to participate in the chat, became beneath adequate than agreeable with their absolute arguments. And for Jasmine Crockett, the adventure-ably accuracy she had consistently believed that arete in law, as in all fields, takes abounding forms and follows abounding paths. Her alertness to angle her arena that night didn't aloof avert her own credentials. It created amplitude for endless others whose ability had been analogously dismissed. As one first-year law apprentice from a baby accompaniment academy wrote to her, "Watching you that night showed me that I don't charge to apologize for my path. My compassionate of the law isn't bent by my school's prestige, but by the abyss of my abstraction and the candor of my practice." This, added than any trending hashtag or viral clip, was the accurate pulse of that electric moment aback Jasmine Crockett adapted an insult into an befalling to claiming who gets to affirmation. Ability in America's best important conversations. If you begin this breakdown of the Dershowitz-Crocker battle valuable, don't balloon to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Our approach brings you the best able moments in political and acknowledged debates analyzed for best understanding. Comment beneath with your thoughts on who had the bigger acknowledged altercation about presidential amnesty and allotment this video to accumulate the conversation.